Long before there was such a thing as Google or smartphones, I was in the habit of carrying a small leather-bound notebook, and I kept it with me night and day everywhere I went. And whenever I read something or heard something or experienced something that seemed to me like a learning moment or an important awareness, one of those things that astonishes our souls, that open our minds to new ideas, different perspectives on life and its meaning, I would write it down. Which is why you should never loan me one of your books if you ever hope to see it again. If I find something useful in your book, I will dog-ear the pages, I will write in the margins, and I will keep it. And even if you persuaded me to give it back to you, it would no longer be presentable. Through the years, I've been doing exactly what Ralph Waldo Emerson suggested. I've been writing my own Bible, collecting the truths that I have encountered in poetry, literature, philosophy, music, and in conversation, knowing full well that in my life I'm never more than 7 days away from the next time I'm going to be standing up in front of the public, who sometimes expect me to say something that is meaningful or useful or purposeful or true. 30 years ago, when I was ordained following 8 years of higher education, I was positioned in the front of a church, in front of my family, my friends, and the members of my student church. And I was given an examination by the regional minister of the Christian church in Kentucky. And in that examination, I was expected to answer in the affirmative a long list of things such as pledging my faith that the Old and New Testaments of the Bible were the Word of God, belief in my redemption and the sacrifice of Jesus Christ, and several other things that I could not now, not only not answer in the affirmative, I'm not even sure I could make it through the service with a straight face. I complained at the time that the church required seminarians to go away for years questioning everything, learning to critically examine every truth claim, consider every contradictory philosophy, and then at the end of the years, they expect you to stand up in public and forget everything they required you to learn, pull your brains out by the roots, and confidently swear that you believe everything that no one on earth could sanely claim to believe with certainty. The ancient creeds of the church, the accumulation of church doctrines, rules, dictates, are not the culmination of human reasoning. They are the death of human reasoning. It's not the product of logic, it's the end of logic, the end of inquiry, growth, discovery. I fear that the traditional church is dying, but my fear is not the fact that the old denominational structures of religion are going to pass away. My fear is that they're not dying fast enough. If they don't die faster and get out of the way, they may prevent the rising from the ashes of something that actually is worth keeping, something that does preserve sanity, sanctity, a sense of the holy within our civilization. I fear that spirituality itself may cease if we don't get the anti-intellectual, anti-reason part of our religious traditions out of the way. If it was not the Buddha himself, at least from very ancient Buddhist tradition, there has been this awareness that you cannot simply pass on intact a religion from one generation to another generation. The Buddha taught that we should not take any religious books, not the Bible, not the Quran, not any other religious text, as if it had been written by God. The sacred texts of all the world's religions are the best efforts of ancient faith communities to express what had astonished their souls, the truths that had guided them, that had helped them along their way. And in that sense, all of those religious texts have value, but all of them were written by people who did not know where the sun goes at night. God doesn't write books. And if God did write books, it would certainly be better than the books that are esteemed by Christians, Jews, Hindus, and Buddhists. Though the Buddha became the founder of a religion that bore his name, he instructed his students that they should not believe things just because their predecessors had believed those things, that they had been handed down to them by authority figures or preceding generations, that they should look for truth by observation, by examining it, by testing it. Truth is not Republican or Democrat. It is not liberal or conservative. And as Gandhi observed, God is not a Jew or a Christian or a Hindu or a Buddhist. God has no religion. Ultimate truth is not the possession of any philosophy, any religion, and certainly not of any one generation. I suspect that most of us had similarly indoctrinating Sunday school experiences in which we were encouraged, if not rewarded, for trying to force ourselves to believe religious claims for which there was no evidence whatsoever. You were applauded, praised, encouraged for asserting that you believe things that no one can know. I'm not sure where Lewis Carroll got all of his ideas. I'm suspicious of some of it. But Alice's famous conversation with the White Queen in Through the Looking Glass sounds almost like church school for me when Alice objected, saying that she simply could not believe impossible things. And the Queen scolded her, saying, "I dare say you haven't had much practice. When I was your age, I always did it for half an hour a day. Why, sometimes I believed as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast." Traditional religion rewards us for exerting ourselves to believe, but as the British philosopher Bertrand Russell said, what is wanted is not the will to believe, but the will to find out, which is the opposite, right? We should not admire or praise anyone for believing things for which they have no reason to believe them. That is rather to be pitied than to be admired. The use of the word faith to mean believing in things without evidence is, I'm convinced, a very bad use of the term. But even if that is what is meant by many religious people, they cannot command that their unsubstantiated convictions be shared by the rest of us. There is no more reason to believe in heaven and hell than there is to believe in Asgard or Star Wars Tatooine. There is no more evidence for angels than there is for unicorns. There is no more evidence that there is a Santa Claus than there is that you have an immortal soul, with the sole exception that I clearly remember waking up on Christmas morning and there were presents in the living room under the tree. So I've got more evidence for Santa Claus than I've got for the fact that I've got a soul. Yes, you have a right to believe whatever you wish about life and death, about angels and demons and souls. You do not have the right to then try to influence the content of school textbooks, to reflect your flat earth beliefs, or to enact laws to safeguard your prejudices about gay folks or gender roles. You have the right to believe that the sky is green and grass is blue, but you should recognize that the rest of us are not going to join you in that just because you insist upon it. Now, I recognize that for many people, holding on to traditional religious beliefs in spite of a lack of supportive evidence for those beliefs is part of how they hold their world together. Some people could not face the grief that they have experienced or deal with the horrors that have happened to them without a belief in an invisible world where everything is going to be set right again. And therein lies the challenge for progressive thinkers. Are you willing to let go of the security blanket of false certainty in order to live with the uncertainty of honest inquiry? Thomas Paine, one of the founding intellectual giants at the time of the birth of our nation, said that to argue with a person who has renounced the use of reason is like administering medicine to the dead. There certainly is a wide and popular strain of religion that engages in wishful thinking, irrational beliefs, what I very flat-footedly call magic and superstition. But I want to remind you that from the time of Moses and Buddha, of Jesus and Confucius, there's always been a strain of religion that has been called a wisdom tradition. Religion isn't always magic and superstition. In its better parts, the reason that I'm still a part of it is that there is a way of being religious that is an affirmation of wisdom, a tradition that is not full of creedal answers, but is full of sincere seeking, questioning, searching for meaning and truth. A tradition that adamantly rejects vacuous beliefs and is willing to change in the presence of new information, to be willing to advocate prophetically and even when threatened with martyrdom for justice, for liberation, for truth, and towards a realization of a common humanity in which we respect life, no matter what the color of the skin, the sexual orientation, who they love or don't love, by their nature, the sound of their language, and a religion that recognizes that all of our lives are enriched by art, by beauty, by nature, and in which we seek to emerge from the darkness of ignorance and prejudice into the light of sincere reason and love. It may not be politically correct to say it just this way, but folks, all religions are not the same, not even close. In The Spiral Staircase, one of Karen Armstrong's biographical works, she says very plainly, if your understanding of the divine made you kinder, more empathetic, and impelled you to express sympathy in concrete acts of loving kindness, that's a good theology. But if your notion of God made you unkind, belligerent, cruel, self-righteous, or led you to kill in God's name, that's a bad theology. And folks, don't we have more bad theology around us than we have good theology? And isn't it clear that we need to be willing to differentiate between the two to pursue the better way? We are surrounded by bad theology in many of the Christian churches around us, as well as in the extreme forms of Islam that we hear about in the news, and in the Zionist forms of Judaism, too often found in both Israel and in American politics. But it is our job to seek, to grow, to question, to discover, to find a healthy faith, and then not simply to teach it and put it up on YouTube, but to embody it, to practice it, to live it as a witness to a healthy faith. In the same book, Armstrong says, religion is not about accepting 20 impossible propositions before breakfast, but about doing things that change you. It is a moral aesthetic, an ethical alchemy, that if you behave in a certain way, you will be transformed. If you practice it, you will be changed. So, my friends, I invite you to keep your treasured scriptures, but only to the extent to which they challenge you morally and astonish your soul. But then add to them the truths that you discover along the way. Apply reason. Apply critical thinking and intellectual inquiry to your search, and then, and more importantly, have the courage to embody those truths that you've discovered. Do not cower or conform to tradition or other people's expectations. Live like a prophet. Go ahead and be that one-eyed person in the nation of the blind. Don't fall for propaganda, whether it comes from your church, your government, or from corporate media. Think, live, be free, and be willing to be changed by the truths that you discover. You are not your parents. You are not the religion you were born into. You are not the nation where you happen to have been born. You must be your own creation. Be that person, and be that person with courage and honesty. Amen.
You have been watching a progressive Christian video from the Community Christian Church of Springfield, Missouri. We encourage our viewers to donate to our efforts in feeding the homeless and hungry of our community. Write to us at Rev. Dr. Ray at AOL.com for more information.